My name is Clara Sterling. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my life, I believe my father, Robert, was my anchor in a sometimes tumultuous sea. After my mother died when I was just a girl, it was always him and me, a tiny but resilient team. That is, until he married Isabella when I was 16. For years, she was a master of duplicity, presenting one face to my father and a much colder one to me. When Dad passed away last month, I braced myself for the worst at the reading of his will. But what I never, ever anticipated was Isabella rising to her feet, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "She gets nothing," she declared to the silent room. I made sure of it. And then, the most surreal thing happened. The lawyer, Arthur Wallace, started to laugh. If you're here listening to my story, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and maybe dropping a comment to let me know where you're watching from as I tell you how my entire world was shattered and then pieced back together in the most unexpected way. My childhood was cleaved in two the day my mother succumbed to a vicious form of breast cancer. I was only 8. The sterile, antiseptic scent of that hospital room, the rhythmic, almost hypnotic beep of the heart monitor that eventually fell silent, those sense memories still ambush me in quiet moments. But what emerged from that wreckage was a beautiful, albeit bittersweet, new chapter with my father, Robert. He was utterly broken, as was I. But he poured all his grief into becoming both mother and father to me. Robert Sterling was not a rich man when my mother passed. He was running a fledgling cybersecurity consultancy, Sterling Secure Systems, from a makeshift office in our modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet Boston suburb. I have vivid memories of him working late into the night at our kitchen table, the cool blue glow of his laptop screen painting his tired but resolute face. "Clara Bear," he'd say, using the nickname that was his and his alone. "Someday, all of this hard work will pay off." And it did. In the 8 years that followed, Sterling Secure Systems grew from a one-man operation into a $250 million corporation with offices in 6 major cities. Dad had brilliantly identified a crucial niche in providing security solutions for financial institutions, right as the digital banking revolution was taking off. His proprietary encryption algorithms became the gold standard. Despite his soaring success, Dad never lost his core identity. He drove the same Honda Accord for a decade, insisted on keeping our family home instead of upgrading to a mansion, and was adamant that I understand the value of honest work. Starting when I was 14, I spent my summers at the main office, filing documents and answering the main phone line. By 16, I was helping with rudimentary coding tasks and was allowed to sit in on some of the client meetings. "I want you to understand this business from the inside out, Clara," he'd tell me. "Not because I expect you to take over, but because knowing how things are built gives you the freedom to carve your own path." But everything shifted the summer I turned 16. That's when Isabella Croft entered our lives. She was an office manager at a major bank, one of my father's most important clients. I still remember the first time she came over for dinner. She was wearing a navy blue dress that was the perfect blend of professional and alluring, and her ash blonde hair was coiffed so perfectly it looked like a helmet. "Your home is just so charming, Robert," she'd said, though I saw the slight, almost imperceptible curl of her lip as she scanned our cozy, well-lived-in living room. So much character. To my father, Isabella was a breath of fresh air, warm, engaging, and utterly captivated by everything he said. She'd laugh at his terrible dad jokes and touch his arm in a way that seemed to make him physically inflate with pride. With me, however, it was a different story entirely whenever Dad left the room. "Clara," she said that first night, as she helped me clear the dinner plates, her voice suddenly losing all its warmth and dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't get any bright ideas about me trying to be your new mother. I'm here for Robert. You'll be off to college in a couple of years, and we can all just maintain a civil distance until then." I was so stunned by her bluntness that all I could do was mumble something about never assuming she was trying to replace my mom. She offered a thin, tight smile that didn't come anywhere near her eyes. Good. That will make this whole process much simpler. Isabella quickly became a fixture, always arriving with a small, thoughtful gift for Dad or some urgent business matter that only he could advise on. Within 3 months, they were exclusive. Within 6, she had convinced him to let her and her son, Leo, who was 17, move in. Our house transformed almost instantly. Isabella embarked on a systematic redecoration, replacing our comfortable, worn furniture with sleek, minimalist pieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine. The family photos that had lined our walls vanished, supplanted by abstract art that, in Isabella's words, elevated the space. The most crushing blow was when my mother's reading nook, a corner I'd kept exactly as she'd left it, with her favorite armchair, books, and a handmade quilt from her grandmother, was dismantled to become Isabella's home office. "We have to look forward, not live in a shrine," Isabella told my father when I tearfully protested. "Clara needs to understand that." Dad, who I think had never truly healed from losing my mom, seemed reborn under Isabella's spell. He lost weight, updated his wardrobe, and started leaving work at a reasonable hour. He was genuinely happier than I had seen him in years, and I did my best to be happy for him, even as a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. The wedding was a grand, impersonal affair at a 5-star hotel with 300 guests who were mostly business contacts. I stood by my father's side as his best woman, forcing a smile for the cameras while Isabella was walked down the aisle by Leo, her only family in attendance. I left for Stanford 2 weeks later, earlier than necessary for freshman orientation, but desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere at home. Isabella had already made it clear my bedroom was being repurposed as a guest suite, since you'll only be visiting on holidays now. College gave me both distance and perspective. I tried to keep my relationship with Dad alive through weekly calls and visits during breaks, but Isabella had an uncanny knack for interfering. She'd schedule last-minute business dinners on the nights I was home or invent urgent weekend getaways Dad couldn't possibly miss. "Your father works so hard, Clara," she'd say, her voice dripping with faux concern. "He deserves to unwind. You understand, don't you?" Dad continued to be my biggest supporter, paying for my education and helping with rent when I took a job at an educational nonprofit after graduating. My career path initially confused him. "With your mind for systems, you could be making 6 figures in the tech sector," he said during one of our rare one-on-one lunches. "I know, Dad, but it's not all about the money. I want to help make quality education accessible to kids who didn't have the advantages I did." A real, genuine smile spread across his face then, one that reminded me of our life before Isabella. "Your mother would be so proud of you. She always said you had her heart." That simple comment earned me a full week of unanswered phone calls, which I later learned was because Isabella had accidentally overheard it. Leo, meanwhile, had chosen a very different route. After an initial period of awkward teenage indifference toward me, he'd accepted a job at Sterling Secure Systems right after college. He possessed none of my father's technical genius, but he compensated with a slick, salesman-like charm that clients seemed to love. I often wondered if he was more his mother's son than he let on. 5 years into the marriage, the power dynamics had completely inverted. Isabella had morphed from the charming partner into the undisputed matriarch, controlling not only the household but also, increasingly, aspects of the business. The long-term household staff, people who had been with us since I was a child, were replaced one by one. Maria, our housekeeper and cook who knew how to make the chicken soup Dad loved when he was sick, was let go for supposed unsanitary habits. The new chef prepared only the strict Mediterranean diet meals Isabella insisted were vital for Dad's health. My visits home became a logistical nightmare. Isabella always seemed to have an emergency pop-up. A pipe in the guest room would mysteriously burst, or an important client would need Dad to fly to another city on short notice. After several canceled trips, I started booking hotel rooms when I came to town. Dad was confused by this. "Why won't you stay at the house?" "Isabella always has your old room prepared," he'd ask. "It's just easier this way, Dad," I'd reply, not wanting to cause a fight. "This way we can focus on our time together." Isabella's spending was out of control. The family home was sold for a massive mansion in the city's most exclusive enclave. She leased a new luxury car every few months, telling Dad that image is everything at your level. Her social media, managed by a hired PR team, was a curated gallery of their extravagant life. But the most alarming development was her growing influence over the company. Leo was promoted to Vice President of Client Relations, a role created just for him, over more qualified senior employees. Dad's founding partner, David Chen, finally called me. "Clara, I don't want to overstep," David said during a discreet lunch, "but things are changing at the company in ways that are starting to worry me. Your father is making decisions that just don't seem like him." "What kind of decisions?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Restructuring that puts Leo in charge of departments he knows nothing about, shifting resources from RD to splashy marketing projects. And Isabella, she's sitting in on executive strategy meetings now, did you know that?" I didn't. Every time I tried to raise these points with Dad, he'd wave them away. "Everything's fine, Clara Bear. Businesses evolve. We have to adapt." But Dad himself was changing. At 62, he'd always been a dynamo of energy. Now he seemed tired, forgetful, and oddly reliant on Isabella for even minor decisions. My best friend, Natalie, who'd known Dad for years, saw it immediately during a dinner visit. "Is your dad okay?" she asked later. He kept looking at Isabella before he answered any question I asked, even about the Red Sox. My concern shifted to full-blown alarm when Sarah Jenkins, Dad's executive assistant of over a decade, contacted me in secret. "Clara, I wouldn't be calling if I weren't truly worried," she whispered over the phone. "Your father missed 3 critical meetings last month because Isabella scheduled doctor's appointments at the exact same times. When I tried to move the appointments, she accused me of trying to undermine his care." "What kind of appointments?" I pressed. "That's the thing. She won't say. And now she's bringing him documents to sign without letting me or the legal team see them first. That was the final push I needed." With help from Natalie, who had connections in corporate HR, I started digging into Isabella's past. What we found was disturbing. She had been married twice before, both times to wealthy men significantly older than her. Both marriages ended abruptly within 5 years. There were sealed court records from her second divorce that we couldn't access, but the timeline was suspicious. During this time, I began dating Ethan Reed, an attorney specializing in estate law whom I met at a fundraiser. As we grew closer, I confided in him. "From what you're describing, Clara," he said carefully, "it sounds like there could be financial manipulation. The most important thing you can do is document every single thing you observe." I started a detailed log. I also reached out to some of Dad's oldest friends, who confirmed they'd been seeing less and less of him. "Robert canceled our monthly golf game 6 months ago," said Frank, his college roommate. "Said his doctor advised against it. But I saw him at the club restaurant with Isabella and some people I didn't recognize, and he looked almost embarrassed to see me." A grim picture was forming. Isabella was systematically isolating my father. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with Sarah's name. "Clara," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Your father collapsed at the office. They've taken him to Mass General. Isabella is with him, but I thought you needed to know. I was on the first flight back to Boston, my mind a vortex of worst-case scenarios. By the time I got to the hospital, Isabella had already seized control. A security guard blocked my path. I'm sorry, miss. Mrs. Sterling has restricted visitors to immediate family only. I am Clara Sterling, his daughter, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I am immediate family. It took 3 hours and the intervention of my father's own primary care physician to finally get into his room. Dad looked frail and small in the hospital bed. His face was pale, and he had lost a shocking amount of weight. When his eyes fluttered open and he saw me, a faint smile appeared. Clara Bear, he whispered, his hand finding mine. You came. Of course I came, Dad. What happened? He closed his eyes. Brain tumor, he said, his voice barely audible. Aggressive. My world spun. How long have you known? Suspected for a few weeks. Headaches. Isabella's been taking me to specialists. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, tears welling up. He squeezed my hand. Didn't want to worry you. Isabella thought it best. Then, with a sudden flash of clarity, he added, Everything is arranged, Clara. Trust Arthur. He knows. Before I could ask what he meant, Isabella swept in, her face a mask of wifely devotion. Robert, darling, you need your rest, she cooed, physically pushing me aside. Clara, the doctors were very clear. You can come back tomorrow. The following weeks were a masterclass in Isabella's manipulation. Dad was diagnosed with glioblastoma. Isabella positioned herself as his primary caregiver, scheduling his treatments without telling me and dismissing my research into experimental trials as too risky. My access to Dad became a moving target. My approved visiting times always coincided with his treatments or when he was heavily sedated. During one rare visit when I found him lucid, I brought Ethan to meet him. Dad rallied, asking sharp questions about Ethan's work. He's a good man, Dad told me when Ethan stepped out. Reminds me of a younger me. His voice grew stronger. Clara, listen. Isabella is not... The door burst open, and Isabella stormed in, her face a thundercloud of rage. Who authorized this? You need to leave. You're agitating him. 2 days later, Sarah called, crying. Clara, your father's been moved to hospice. Isabella made the decision this morning. They're saying he only has weeks left. I was on a plane that night and went straight to the hospice facility. He was much worse. His breathing was shallow, his frame skeletal. But when I took his hand, his eyes opened. Clara, he whispered. Time is short. Dad, please fight. He shook his head. Too late for that, not too late for the truth. Isabella, she wants it all. I know, Dad. I'm going to fight for you. Tears filled his eyes. Not for me, for you, for what's right. Promise me. I promise. I sobbed. That was our last real conversation. 3 days later, while I was stuck in traffic after Isabella gave me the wrong time for a visit, my father died with only her by his side. The grief was a physical weight, but beneath it, a cold fire of determination began to burn. I would keep my promise. The funeral Isabella arranged was a spectacle that had nothing to do with the man my father was. The massive cathedral was filled with business associates and society contacts. Extravagant floral arrangements flanked an ornate casket that Dad, a man of simple tastes, would have loathed. Isabella, in a tailored black suit, played the grieving widow to perfection. Robert always said Leo was the son he never had. I overheard her tell a CEO. He was grooming him to take over. My blood boiled. My own eulogy was about the real Robert Sterling. His integrity, his humor, his belief that wealth was a responsibility. I shared stories of him teaching me to code and never missing a school play. I saw many of Dad's oldest friends and colleagues nodding, some with tears in their eyes. Isabella just sat there, stone-faced, checking her watch. At the reception, several people made cryptic comments. David Chen hugged me and whispered, "Your father was always 10 steps ahead. Remember that." Frank squeezed my shoulder. Robert made sure his affairs were in order. He never left anything to chance. Even Sarah slipped me a note. Arthur has everything prepared. Trust the process. The meeting with Arthur Wallace, Dad's lawyer of 20 years, was set for Thursday. The day before, I visited my childhood home, knowing it might be the last time. It was a sterile showplace, but in what was once Dad's study, I found a small key in a drawer. It opened a hidden compartment in the library bookcase. Inside was a box with photos of my mother, her wedding ring, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in Dad's handwriting. I quickly pocketed it. As I left, I ran into the new housekeeper, Martha. "Miss Clara," she said quietly. "Mrs. Sterling had people over last night celebrating." I heard her say, Tomorrow it will all be official, and something about finally getting what I deserve. The next morning, I arrived at Arthur Wallace's office with Ethan by my side. Isabella and Leo were already there, dressed like they were attending a second funeral. Isabella gave me a cold nod, then whispered as she passed, "Prepare to say goodbye to everything, Clara. Your free ride is officially over." Arthur's office was classic old-world law, wood-paneled walls, leather-bound books, and a massive mahogany desk. He began by reading several smaller bequests to longtime employees and friends. A generous gift to our former housekeeper, Dad's vintage fishing gear to Frank, a retirement package for Sarah. With each name, Isabella grew more agitated. "Is all this really necessary, Arthur?" she snapped. "We're here for the important matters." "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said coolly, "your husband was quite specific. If you'd prefer, you can wait outside." She fumed silently. After finishing the smaller gifts, Arthur cleared his throat, but Isabella couldn't wait. She stood up, her voice ringing with triumph. "Let me save everyone the trouble. I know what's next. Robert changed his will. She gets nothing." A heavy silence fell. "I have the revised documents right here," she said, pulling papers from her handbag. "My attorney helped Robert with them 3 months ago. He realized who truly cared for him." She shot a venomous look my way. "She gets nothing. I made sure of it." To everyone's astonishment, Arthur let out a soft chuckle, which grew into a full, hearty laugh. The sound echoed in the stuffy room. Isabella's smug expression faltered. "What's so funny? These are legal documents." Arthur composed himself, wiping his eyes. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his tone now laced with something like pity, "I have no doubt you possess documents. What I find amusing is your complete misunderstanding of your husband's financial planning. You see, those papers, whatever they say, are essentially worthless." "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Robert signed them." "I'm sure he did," Arthur replied smoothly. "But you see, Robert established an irrevocable trust for Clara over a year ago. To put it in the simplest terms, Mrs. Sterling, you can't change a trust that already transferred $60 million last year." Isabella's face went corpse white. "That's impossible. I would have known." "Would you?" Arthur asked mildly. "You signed the transfer paperwork yourself. It was in that large stack of year-end tax forms you were in such a hurry to get through before your spa weekend in Aspen." My mind reeled. Arthur continued, his voice now formal. "Robert created a comprehensive estate plan. The Clara Sterling Education Trust was funded last year with $60 million and a 30% ownership stake in Sterling Secure Systems. It is completely irrevocable and falls outside the scope of any subsequent will." Isabella collapsed into her chair, speechless. "He couldn't have," she whispered. "Oh, I assure you, he did," Arthur said, nodding to his assistant who set up a projector. "Robert also left extensive documentation of his concerns about you. He recorded this message 6 months ago. The screen lit up, and there was my father, tired but resolute. 'If you are watching this,' he began, 'it means Isabella has tried to alter my final wishes. Any changes to my will made after September of last year should be considered executed under duress.'" He looked directly at the camera. "Isabella, I know about your meetings with your lawyer. I know about your attempts to access my private accounts. And I know about your previous marriages and the sealed records from your divorce that you thought were buried forever." Isabella let out a strangled gasp. "Clara," Dad continued, his voice softening, "I am so sorry for the pain this has caused you. I realize the truth too late, but I have done everything in my power to protect you and the company I built. Trust Arthur." The video ended. In addition, Arthur said, "Robert commissioned a forensic accounting investigation which has been forwarded to the appropriate authorities." Isabella shot to her feet. "This is slander. You have no proof." "Actually," Arthur said calmly, "we have extensive proof. including records of the $3 million you transferred from Robert's personal account to your sister in Florida, a sister you claimed didn't exist. Leo, who had been silent, looked at his mother in shock. "Mom, you told me that was from your savings." Over the next hour, Arthur laid out the full plan. Isabella would get the house and a modest allowance, contingent on her dropping all legal challenges. Leo received a 5% stake in the company, but the majority ownership of Sterling Secure Systems had been transferred into a new entity, the Sterling Foundation, dedicated to technology education for underprivileged youth. And Dad had named me as its head, giving me controlling interest in the company he built. The aftermath was chaos. Isabella fled Arthur's office. Leo, after a moment of hesitation, mumbled an apology to the room and followed her. Once they were gone, David Chen clapped me on the shoulder. "Robert would be so proud, Clara." Later, alone with me and Ethan, Arthur poured 3 glasses of scotch. "Your father and I shared a drink from this bottle when he finalized the trust," he said. He suspected her for about 18 months. He overheard her on the phone with Leo, planning how they'd streamline the company once he was gone. That was before the diagnosis. He then put every safeguard in place. He handed me the envelope I'd found. That contains access to his private digital vault. He recorded everything. I felt compelled to go to the house one last time. We found Isabella in the study, systematically smashing everything, a bottle of vodka at her side. "Come to gloat?" she slurred, throwing a paperweight that shattered against the wall. "Happy now that you've taken it all?" "I didn't take anything, Isabella," I said calmly. "Dad protected what was his." "Yours," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea how tedious it was, pretending to care about his boring stories for 7 years? I earned every penny." Just then, Leo appeared, his face a mask of horror. "Mom, stop it." I saw the bank statements. This was never going to work. Before she could reply, the doorbell rang. It was Arthur, with 2 men in suits. "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, "these gentlemen are from the Financial Crimes Division. They have some questions." The fight drained from her face. It was finally, truly over. In the months that followed, I found my footing. I took the helm of the Sterling Foundation, and it was the most fulfilling work of my life. Every time I visited a classroom and saw children light up as they learned to code, I felt Dad's presence. Leo, after being cleared of direct involvement, requested a demotion and started working his way up honestly. "Isabella taught me to take," he told me. "Your father showed me how to give. I'm trying to follow the better example." Isabella accepted a plea deal that avoided prison time. I chose not to push for more. It wasn't for her, it was for me. I didn't want to be consumed by a quest for vengeance. On the anniversary of Dad's death, Ethan and I scattered wildflowers at his memorial. "He would be so proud of you," Ethan said. I turned the house back into a home, restoring my mother's reading nook and filling the walls with family photos again. That night, in Dad's study, I finally read his letter. "My dearest Clara Bear," it began. "If you are reading this, you have navigated the storm. I am sorry for the pain, but I was always confident in your strength. Remember that wealth is a tool, not a purpose. Integrity, purpose, and love, these are your true inheritance. Live by them, and you will never go wrong. I love you more than words can say. Always, your Dad." His letter confirmed what I already knew. His greatest gift wasn't money, it was the values he had instilled in me. Isabella had craved his fortune, but never understood the source of his true wealth. Looking back, this painful journey taught me that true love protects and endures, even beyond death. Have you ever had to fight for what you believe in against someone you thought you could trust? Share your story in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening. End of story.